Go ahead and try to convince me you're not on the Truman Show right now.
Hello.
I shouldn't have moved it. I was going to pick it up and grab it. They really don't, but we just did. Hello. Welcome back to another installment. Oh, he's gonna cough it.
It's possible, ladies and gentlemen.
Real close. We are back with another installment of This Podcast Is Not For You, brought to you again by Monday Zero Alcohol Whiskeys and Spirits.
Yes.
I think it's Monday.com is the website, correct?
DrinkMonday.co.
DrinkMonday.co.
And our code.
And our code is not for you 10.
Not for you 10.
Not for you 10.
10% off site-wide.
Jacob has what is the name of your drink right now?
Don't know. I forgot.
Okay. If you want to forget what your drink is, this is a good one.
Yes.
The forgot is really heavy.
We're drinking the whiskey mixed with ginger ale and lemon.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You also doing the ginger ale?
Yes.
I'm doing the gin with some lime juice and a little bit of zest of lemon as well.
And we're going to do a little bit of non-drunk history today.
That's right, Jacob.
Good one, dude.
That is
nice.
Right. My name is Peyton.
My name is Jake.
My name is Wes.
We're back, and as you can tell from the title, this episode is about history, which got Wes's blood a-boiling, I think.
I'm loving it, dude. Just let me know how many minutes I can talk about World War II.
So, as an introduction, I just wanted to read a little statement that I wrote up.
Oh.
Opening statements.
This is a quote from me, but
That's amazing.
History is written by the victors.
It's a quote from me. So
when did you say this, Peyton?
Have you said it yet? Okay.
What's the concept?
This will I proactively wrote this as a quote for this episode.
He's quoting episode 67 of this podcast. It's not for you.
Wow, I'm so excited for this.
No, it's serious. That's the problem.
What do we
should
do?
I read it quoting you even though you haven't said it?
Sure.
Then it will never be a quote from Peyton if he doesn't say it, though.
Yeah. The joke is on me because the quote is of Wes. Here we go. He's not going to be able to get through it.
Human beings are bound to a timeline. Our species goal... You misspelled species.
It wouldn't have mattered if he was reading it. What the frick?
It's a quote. No quote.
Our species' goals, means, appearance, way of life, and just about everything else you can think of has changed, is changing, and will change. Because time is on a line, that means that we have the ability to look back on that line and see landmarks. Whatever you believe about who and what our older, and oldest stories are, it is undeniable that things have happened.
I forgot that it's all caps.
The recordings of what might be a different story, but if it's changed...
Nailing it.
But if it's changed, is changing, and will continue to change.
Gotcha.
Do those changes in the past influence us in the present? Or more accurately, should they influence us in the future? Quote, Peyton James Walker
Never.
in 2022.
That part about changes was all Wes.
What? That was 100%
No,
you. I just deleted all of it.
Okay.
Wow, that was a beautiful quote. I'm so proud of you for having said that at some point.
The direction was lacking, but the script was good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So basically, the idea for this episode was to just that. And we can all admit that things are...
You sound like Reggie Watts at a TED Talk. We can all admit that things are changing.
Oh, man. We should not have corpsed earlier.
I love it. I'm so excited about this.
Anyway, maybe we'll just we'll start and then maybe we'll get into it here. Let's set the parameters of our discussion. Mm-hmm. So this means like how far back are we going to talk in terms of like the things that have developed over time in terms of like cultural norms and right and wrong and morality and government and currency and like all this stuff. I was going to leave it up for both of you guys to kind of pitch your idea in terms of like how far back do we want to talk about the beginning of this country? Do we want to talk about the beginning of Western civilization? Do we want to, you know, how far back do we want to set our parameters? Because we're talking about
history.
We're talking about history, but we're also specifically, there's kind of a 3-part discussion. First is, should the past influence us in the future? Does your own personal past influence your personal future and present? And then 3 is like, how reliable is our history? So when we set our parameters, those 3 things are going to be affected. So what would you guys like to talk about specifically?
It's hard because you can draw connections to everything literally all the way back. Like, because history is a chain of events, one impacting the other, it just builds on itself. So it's hard to draw a line. Like, I guess the easiest is even just American history because it's what we have the best knowledge of. Probably collectively, we have the best knowledge of American history as opposed to world history and pre-American history. But my gut reaction would be most reasonably to draw the line at the beginning of American history.
Okay. Jacob, you concur?
The easy answer is to say that I agree with that.
But you're going to go 2 years before that.
No, I don't know anything about anything. I hope 67 episodes in, I hope people know that I'm not an idiot. But I could not... If America was discovered in 1850, I would be like, yep, that sounds right. I mean, seriously. So American history would be great.
I don't think you need to know dates to know like how
the theory that we're discussing.
Yeah.
We're not discussing necessarily specific events.
Oh, right. I'm down. So let's do American because that would be the easiest thing.
Yeah,
for me,
I think that's a great parameter to set. Okay, so we're talking the foundation of America. These United States, if you will. Okay, so part 1 is, should the past, so should America's past influence our future?
Start ignition sequence.
Start ignition sequence, baby. So how has the world changed from the beginning of the parameter that we set, which is the beginning of the United States?
See that?
Yeah, I can. I've got notes on here that aren't up
you
there.
got additional stuff.
He didn't know what we were going to choose.
He's got secret stuff.
He didn't know what we were going to choose.
So it's like a branching term. Is he your, like, DM right now?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You think that I wrote that quote for me, but it was always going to be you.
Dude, history's so cool now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Professor Walker.
Gonna order a 60-sided die.
So just generally, how has the world changed? So not just the country, you're talking, how has the world changed since the beginning of the United States? So 300 years-ish?
Right, we all know.
Jake knows for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot.
Pretty radically.
Yeah.
Especially more so even in the last 100 years because of the advancement of technology.
Right.
Everything has kind of
That's the big one.
impacted and
The world is smaller.
it's
quote.
sped up as well. Like technological advances are building upon the previous one. And when a major stride through is made with like computing, it just like sped it up exponentially and continues to be that way. Like you're starting to see the things that people talked about 50 years ago as like, man, in the year 3000, we're going to have things like glasses that have computer screens on them and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're starting to see some of that stuff actually happen because of how rapidly technology has advanced.
Yeah.
Like you go back 100 years and cars were barely a thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
And now they're everywhere. So, I mean, it's changed immensely, but I also think it's changed in terms of morality a lot and just global perspective, I think obviously the three of us are all Christians, so we kind of look at history in a different way than maybe some other people do.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, let's pivot to Jake and let me rephrase the question a little bit.
I don't know.
Do you think it's changed for the better or for the worse, or is it neutral? Is it just on a line of up and down, but maybe over the arc, it's going to hit the point of where it started, you know? It's like, what do you...
Yes.
Do you want me to call in a different student?
No. Yeah, I think the hard thing about, the interesting thing about the Christian worldview is that in theory it will never be getting better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it has to get to the point of...
it depends on your perspective on... See, I have a different perspective on end of time stuff than you do.
eschatological stuff.
Yes.
Well, I guess it doesn't matter what you think's going to happen. Eventually, as far as I understand it, Christ is coming back because it's unsalvageable, and that's how I interpret the text. So whether or not you think he's actually coming back in physical form or is he going to, whatever. But so in my opinion, I just don't think it's going to be getting better. Sure. Big picture.
Sure.
And that doesn't change how you treat people day to day. Obviously, that's the biggest thing is if you think that this is inevitable, then you need to be doing everything you can, actually. So I think that the world is getting worse since the American founding.
Sure.
Is that the right term?
Definitely.
A lot of that is the technological thing. It's, back in the day, we were the only ones that had nukes. Well, now we don't even freaking know who has nukes. And now everyone doesn't trust everyone. And then now you can know that these guys just, the leader just met with this leader because someone got a picture of it and tweeted it on the internet. And it's just so reactionary, everything is. And you saw that hugely during the Trump presidency. It's like he was reacting to everything all the time. And that was the first president really because Obama had Twitter, but he never ran it.
Right.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah,
it was never
PR.
him.
Yep.
And so it was really the first time you had a world leader reacting to everything all the time. And so it's like, I think since the founding of America, the world has just shrunk, like I said, because of technology. And the hearts of people will always be greedy. Yep. They will always want power. They will always want influence. They will all, and so I think that has just grown,
Sure.
But people feel threatened. They need to compensate for it in some way or whatever, so.
I don't mean to jump outside of our parameters, but I am the professor.
That's true.
So I would only add, I think you're right. I think overall the timeline, if you zoom out even further, it is on a downslope.
Mm-hmm.
See, I disagree.
It might be on the same slope because here's what you've got in terms of. I guess it depends on what you determine as a good direction or a bad direction. I think you see it in slopes. Like you see empires come into existence, like America.
Mm-hmm.
You see them rocket because when it becomes an empire, it rockets up.
Right.
I mean, you're talking prosperity and peace and good times, it's like that's what people value, right? And that was at a peak in the 20s and the 30s.
Yeah.
And then I think you've got every empire before has hit a point of where it turns into more depravity, turns into more indulgence, it turns into more overindulgence, really. And I think we're getting to that point. I think that's where it's really hard because we've been alive for 30 years. It's like we don't get to see even 300 years of this country, in person. Yeah. So it's anyway.
I've got responses to both of those things.
Let's just go to the next question, and then we'll hit. I think we should get there.
Okay.
After these couple questions. So what are some landmark moments in our nation's, let's say for humanity, for humanity as a whole, what are some landmark moments inside of this country's existence?
Yeah. Well, I think the founding of this country is one of them.
Right.
Before the U.S., you didn't have a country based on the idea of liberty being inherent
Full freedom.
in the people, not in the government deciding your liberties.
Sure.
And our founding documents were put in place to try and restrict the federal government from imposing on your liberties,
Right.
as opposed to them granting them to you. And before the U.S., never happened.
Right.
That was a completely new concept.
New country just dropped, dude. Check it out.
You see it? Yeah, because I mean, it's undeniable. Government is a necessity. Like,
Yes.
it has to exist.
Government is a
Structure needs to happen. So
Yes.
how do you wiggle into that? You know, like you're saying. I mean, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first time that a governmental structure has been based in that way.
And so along those lines, kind of in response to what you guys were saying, I have a exactly like polar opposite view than you do on this, Jake. So the way I see the Bible teaching history from here on out is that Christianity is going to continue to spread throughout the world. There are more Christians alive on the planet today than have ever lived before.
Christian in title.
Yes.
Sure.
But the Christian faith has never been more pervasive in the world. It's never been spread more. Our pastor the other day used the example of like, there's farmers in rice paddies in Asia listening to sermons from halfway around the world on their headphones. And so the gospel has never been farther. I think, and we're not obviously going to get into the scriptures and all of that stuff because we just don't have time. But I have a perspective essentially that...
That also doesn't mean that the world is better.
Let me get there. Hang on.
Okay.
I have a perspective that the Bible teaches that... I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this clearly. I don't believe Revelation is talking about the future. That's the biggest linchpin.
Is it the fall of Israel?
In 70 AD.
Classic.
Yes.
Heard this one before.
Okay. So I believe Revelation's talking about 70 AD. There's a lot of stuff about that. But if that's the case, if it's not in the future, then I don't believe the future is a negative thing because I think we are living in the church age where the church continues to grow. It says it'll start as a mustard seed and become a mountain that fills the world. And I think we're seeing, to tie this back in, I think the birth of the United States is a high point on the slopes that you're talking about. It's a high point. We've never had a country...
For humanity?
For humanity. We've never had a country founded on a biblical principle, essentially, and generally Christian ideals. We've never had that before. And for a while, it worked very, very well. And in principle, it still works. But there's always ups and downs. But if you zoom out and really look at history, it's going up. The quality of life has never been better on the planet. People are still sinful and depraved, but the quality of life has never been better in terms of more people have food. There's hunger in the world is going down and wealth of the world is going up as well, like just general wealth. Poverty is going down around the world as technology advances. So it's not a straight line up. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's like the best analogy I heard.
That would be unreasonable to expect that.
The best analogy I heard a pastor describe it as, it's like you're climbing a mountain, literally, and there's ups and downs on the mountain as you go, and some are way deep and some are really high. So
yeah, I think it depends on how you define, because I think there's a really strong tie between like really high quality of life and and you no longer need God.
The depravity of man.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's like the more wealthy the world will get, it's like, yes, more people are alive. What's your value in life?
Sure.
Like, what is your...
And I think we're seeing a correction of that because of that very thing. Yes, the depravity is becoming more and more apparent, and that's why you're starting to see people splitting away from each other. It can almost be divided down lines of Christian and non-Christian, almost, in terms of the sides that are fighting with each other right now are holding on to more traditional values versus...
Specifically in this country.
Specifically in this country, yes. But it's happening around the world as well. But all that to say, I think it's impossible to definitively say because we can't know the future. But I think...
Real quick, can we get some other specific landmarks during...
I was just going to... the two really that pop up in my mind are World War I and World War II, but that's not really for humanity. I mean, it's, as someone who didn't live through them, I could say that. I guess that would be my opinion, and that might be wrong.
You could even say for your own life.
I think the Great Depression is a absolute... I mean, I think we're still feeling the ramifications of the Great Depression. The whole ideal of like making a happy plate when you're eating dinner is from our parents that grew up from their parents because their parents lived through the Great Depression, and then they told our parents, you aren't going to waste any food. Yeah. And then we're still feeling that ramification. And so I'd say the Great Depression more than one of the world wars, I guess, would be personally, but I'm sure I'm affected by that in a way I don't understand too. But that would be one that I would say as for humanity.
World War II for us, World War II was way more impactful for the U.S. than World War I was. Mm-hmm. You go to Europe and World War I stuff is everywhere because it impacted them way harder than it did us.
The landscape, literally,
The memorials in Europe are almost... They're not almost all, but a lot of them are for World War I. It's still called the Great War there, and because millions upon millions died. But yeah, I think World War II shaped the modern world.
Yeah.
I think the abolition of slavery has to be mentioned. I think that's one of them.
I was trying to get from World War I, which is like what 15, 14, sort of in there, and then the 40s.
Yep.
World War II. Right after the Great Depression, right? And then slavery's probably 60s, right? 50s, 60s?
1860s? Yep. Slavery?
Yeah.
1860s.
Okay. And then...
I mean, really before that, you're talking just colonialism, essentially.
Yeah.
But I think those... Yeah, I agree. I think those four, let's say the abolition of slavery... World War I and World War II and the Great Depression. The Industrial Revolution probably is in there, but that's right in line with the World Wars. I mean, that's
Tea Party.
It's part of the founding.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
You could roll it into the rebellion, if you will.
Yeah.
Revolution.
Yeah.
I mean,
so is there any way? So
the only other thing I was going to say is the fall of the British Empire. It's really the last.
Sure.
The British Empire and the Soviet Union, the fall of those things globally.
That's old world ending, essentially.
Yeah.
The space race? Realizing that maybe there's something more out there we hadn't realized then, I guess maybe. I don't know.
And that even falls into the fall of the Soviet Union too.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing with history is like so many things are connected to each other and impact each other.
Real quick, we can just talk about
history, dude.
We're gonna win him over.
History.
We're winning him over. How have those specific things affected us now? Like right now, 2022. What are we doing right now? What is, as Americans, as a people, what are we pushing for right now? I mean, how is that? Can you tie it back to any one of those things or a couple of them?
I mean.
The most one that's affecting my life is the one that immediately comes to mind, I guess, would be saying it affects us the most is the wrong thing to say. But the first one that came to mind is the space race because I'm literally using internet now from a product of the space race.
Right.
Like, I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
And
Right.
just the way that low orbiting stuff has affected the way we do everything, the way that the internet has affected the way we do everything, because everything's so connected above our heads, literally, you know.
It's easily the most impactful invention of potentially the last. I mean, I don't even know how far back you could go back. Like the internet and computing, completely revolutionized.
So that would be the
daily
Industrial
life.
Revolution. That would be how that's affecting us, right?
Yep. For sure.
Like I said, the Great Depression still has ramifications for us. I think our parents don't. They see that we don't understand scarcity at all.
Yeah.
And I think that, especially with things that are happening now, that could be a real problem for people our age that aren't thinking about scarcity.
Well, I think
managing
it's,
resources realistically.
I think it's affected people in the inverse of what you're saying. I think it also has affected people that way. I just mean, so the people that grew up in the teens and 20s that went through the Great Depression, so they had children, right? Those are our parents.
Yeah.
And then our parents, so if you go through the Great Depression, your natural instinct is to make sure that doesn't happen for your children, right?
Yeah.
And then those people pass that down to make sure it doesn't happen for their children. And it's, I was watching, I think it was Seinfeld. I think it was Comedians in Cars. And he was saying, we were the first generation that had a childhood. And they thought, that's pretty good. We're going to perfect that.
Yeah.
And that's what they've given to our generation. And so,
that's absolutely
so it's affected, the Great Depression has affected, I think, people in a negative way, but a positive way, in saying like, we have more as 30-year-old men right now than people had in the teens and 20s
For their entire life.
Then and that's a byproduct of love from our families.
Well, if you think about the greatest generation, the one that went to World War II, they were children.
He put it in quotes because he doesn't believe it.
Right.
No, no, not at all.
They went to the moon.
They absolutely were. They went through the Depression as children. And then when war came around, they had seen their fathers go to war during World War I, and then they joined up. The young men of the world and in the U.S. joined up and fought for the ability to have the childhood in the future.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. That generation that went through the Depression built the lives that we have today. And it's on us that a lot of our generation is squandering the opportunity.
I agree.
We find things to be upset about because
Hard
we
work
don't
is
have
really hard to find.
we don't have conflict in our
I agree.
lives.
Yes.
And we make up things to be upset about.
Sure.
It was just self-indulgence.
Yeah.
I mean, and I one of the most revealing things, like, it's interesting how little you know about like your parents' lives, you know, and that's what's so great about, and I don't mean you, I mean like
No, yeah, for sure.
the royal we. Blake Crouch's book Recursion it was so eye-opening to me, because there's just a little line in there, and it's like, I realized that I'll never see my parents in the prime of their lives, and I was just like blew me away. And so I was just trying to do a better job of like learning my parents' stories, and so I asked my dad, I was like, did you want to be an engineer when you got out of college? You know, like, I know you got your degree and stuff. It's like, but what'd you want to do? And he's like, well, I mean, we didn't really think about that. Like, I got a job. I went and got a job.
Yeah.
And I stayed there for 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, it's just like, you're realizing like, and then, you know, I talk to Natty about it all the time too. It's like, and then they continued to do that for 30 years. So we could dick around and have a podcast in our free time.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And it's like your parents and my parents and everyone's parents that just like planned and loved and methodically lived their lives before we were even there. Right. It's like, I mean, my dad lived very like frugally before I was even a thought, because he knew I want to give my kids this life that, you know, I sort of had.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
I was talking to Keller about that the other day. Like, do you think anybody's super passionate about like aluminum siding or, you know, tile business? It's like people in the Industrial Revolution is like, you just did whatever it took, like to, and I think,
what do you want to do for a living wasn't a...
Right. It was just, you're taking over this family business or you're going to war.
That's why I love the show Dirty Jobs, is because it's people with that mentality. They're doing jobs that nobody wants to do, but they have to get done.
Right.
Yeah.
And these people love what they do because it
gives them life.
Yes. It's they know it has to get done, and they understand the value of working hard.
Yeah.
And I even know I struggle with it myself. Like,
sure.
Like not wanting to work hard is very natural to certain. And so, yeah.
You have to it takes an enormous amount of self-control, and you have to cultivate your own environment to make you.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is on who you're around too.
For sure.
Yeah, because it's like that. For sure, there are days like that. But I have a great boss that creates an environment for me at work that makes me more apt to work hard.
Yeah.
I have people in my band that make me more apt to want to work hard.
Yeah.
I have you guys that are doing stuff for the podcast when I'm not doing stuff. You know, it's like it's this syncopated workflow. And
echo chamber of
because if I was left to my own devices, I mean, I remember when I graduated college, I was like, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I vegged out. I mean, in 3 months, did absolutely nothing. Because I was like, I go to work and then
I can just
that's
do whatever
it.
I want.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, we spend 22 years of our lives not determining what we do day to day.
Yeah.
It's determined by school or our parents.
Systems. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they go, here you go. And
you sit on your couch and you watch TV and play Xbox. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's
well,
really
it's a good
interesting.
transition. I mean, the next part is it's more personal. Zooming in on you guys and me.
I can send you the link, the Zoom link, if you guys need
No
me
problem.
to.
Let's zoom with who we got on the line. Let's see. We've got the owner of Monday. I don't know.
Chris, what's up, Chris?
So the question is, does your own personal past influence your present and future, and how does that work? Like, do our own individual past and histories influence our present and future? Or are we always making like spontaneous decisions based on only like current stimuli?
I mean, I think much more now about the decisions I make than I used to, because I look back on my life now and see how every little decision I made led me to where I am now. And yes, that's like kind of a duh statement, but like if I had not, it's when you start thinking, if I hadn't done X, then this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Like if I hadn't moved to California, I wouldn't have gone to work at a camp. I wouldn't have gone to Europe. I wouldn't have then come back to work at a camp where I eventually met my wife.
I knew.
And
we got it.
And then I wouldn't have moved back here with you guys probably.
Right.
And I'm not using my watch.
You wouldn't be using your watch.
I wouldn't be using my watch. But no, like all of those chain reaction things inform the decisions I make now, because I understand how important it is. And I think the experiences that we go through just inform so much of how we behave. Like, it's crazy how much parents influence us, and we don't even know, like, to the extent of which our parents impact us.
Sure.
And for good and bad, depending on who you are and your relationship with your parents, and that's impacted by what their childhood was like. You know, it's so. I think I'm just much more thoughtful, or try to be more thoughtful now about the decisions that I make, or Steph and I make together, because I want to be making the right decision. Not right is in correct or incorrect, but just like the best one for the future.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think more forward, I guess, than I used to because I see the chain that happened that was so crazy. And yeah, I don't know. It's a lot to think about. It's a deep topic.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think that before I let Jake go on it, I think you're right. I mean, the answer is obvious. Obviously, your past affects you.
yeah.
But it's like, how often do you actually think about it? And can we dissect it a little bit? Like, what do you think, Jake?
Well, I think if we're doing what we did for humanity, right? I think there are a few instances in my life that sent them on different courses. And
Right.
I can think of one. A week after I turned 16, I flipped my truck and I was probably 3 inches away from like being impaled by the frame of the door, you know, and I flipped it and rolled it. And I mean, my dad told me probably a few months ago when we were talking about it, he's like, you changed, like, you don't know it, but you changed a lot. Like after that, he's like, you just weren't like the same goofy kid that you were before. Like you changed a lot. And I knew that.
You said you were 15?
16. I just turned 16. And so I knew that a lot of 16-year-olds don't have an experience like that and walk away from it. And then that's just, and it literally, I mean, it was the same road. It was like a mile past where Brooke Huff, who was in my class, went off the same road.
Mm-hmm.
Chance had it that she hit a tree and I didn't.
Yeah.
And it was just like,
right.
It's literally unbelievable that I could not believe that I walked away. And so I think that's shaped who I am completely because a lot of 16-year-olds don't get a wake-up call that they walk away from, unfortunately. And
shaping you in ways that you, like your dad said, you didn't even know some of it.
Yeah.
You know?
I knew that I could die at any moment, but
it became a reality very quickly.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, I lost a lot of friends in high school because of, you know, I became this is what I want to do and this is who I'm going to invest in, you know, and so, you know, relationships like frayed and they fell off and, you know, which I was okay with. I just kind of turned into like, sort of like a dick, I guess, but very sure of himself, which a lot of 16-year-olds just aren't. They're going to parties because that's what their friends are doing. They're doing this because that's what their friends are doing. It's like, I stopped doing anything that wasn't, I thought, you know, right or whatever, and I wasn't perfect. I'm just saying, you know. So that's a huge one. I think
things had more meaning for you.
Yeah, and I think choosing not to go to Missouri State, because I was going to go to Missouri State and study film with Wes or music production or something, and decided to stay here in town because my brother was coming back from Iowa and we were going to play basketball at Ozark together. So that's a huge one because I don't even know where I'd be if I moved to Springfield with you. You know, I have no idea. So that one is another big one. I think currently I might be in the middle of one because I thought I was going to die. So that's interesting. Because I knew that you could get in a car crash or whatever, but I was telling Natty the other day, I was like, I never had the idea that eventually my body will fail.
Yeah.
And it's like you can do all the things right, like, and eventually your body's going to fail. It's like, dang. I mean, that's crazy. It's just inevitable. And so, I think I might, these 2 months after my 30th birthday might be like this
maybe
thing
a second.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But yeah, I would say, obviously, I do think the decisions from my past affect how I decide things now, I guess. Yeah. But
can you, I had this thought as I was writing that because I wanted to hear your guys' answers more than anything else rather than start a discussion.
Do you have any?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the biggest part of my past is
watershed moments.
Is one long moment, and the biggest part of my life was given to a relationship, a romantic relationship, and it was.
You mean one long moment in like
8 years long?
Yes, this thing.
Of the most formative years of my life, literally.
For sure.
You're fused to this other person, and that's affected every decision I've made since then.
Yeah.
But I would assume it's either glass full or glass half empty, half full kind of thing, where it's like, do those things affect you positively or negatively? And it's like, I feel like you can only choose to believe that they affect you positively, right? I mean, if otherwise you're just going backwards, or you're, I don't know.
Maybe in a way, if you choose to think that, you dwell on it less.
Yeah.
Because you're like, at least I'm blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's less of the discussion I want to have. Is like, can you apply that exercise to the first discussion of, does our past as people, as a people, influence our future? And because when you zoom in and make it personal, it's really easy to say, well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the decisions that I made, or Jake made, or you made, definitely affect they may affect what I'm choosing to eat today. I have no idea. You know what I mean? So can you apply that to what our original parameter was, which is the United States?
I think you see that in a lot of ways where people won't let go of the past to a point where it is unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely agree that history matters in the sense that we can learn from the past as a country and make adjustments and move forward from things that have happened in the past that have not been good,
right.
You know, but at a certain point, collectively, we have to learn from them and move forward.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
We have to learn from them and move forward.
Just went off the screen.
But we have to move from them and learn forward. And
that's right.
You see people that want to couch the blame for things that have happened in the past on people today. You see in the racial talk that happens nowadays, there's people wanting to blame all white people for slavery. It's like, none of us alive today had slaves. So like, there's too far that you can take it to a point where it's living in the past, to the point where you're not even looking at the state of reality. You know what I mean?
What would you say to the people on the opposite side of that are trying to hold on to, like, the Constitution, where it's like, what makes you think, what makes those people wrong in saying the Constitution must be a living document, you know? As long as it's not an antithesis to something that's already on the Constitution, is that basically?
Yeah, I think there's a difference because, well, the two things we're talking about here, if we're comparing slavery in the Constitution and the people that latch onto that event that happened, is with the Constitution, nobody's trying to blame somebody and make some people pay for something in the Constitution is more of a philosophical idea that we're basing our government systems on. You know what I mean? And people make arguments about the Constitution being,
I was going to say, I think it's been amended for the better.
Yes.
In certain areas.
Right. I am not against the Constitution being amended when it needs to be.
Yeah.
I don't think you should do it willy-nilly.
Sure.
And I think people want to just like rip things out of the Constitution left and right.
Yeah.
But
I think that's a good example of learning from your past.
And also, it's not...
That's an amendment is learning from your past.
But also, the amendments have never been taking something out of the Constitution. They've been adding a stipulation to the Constitution to ensure more liberty for people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's living in the past on both sides. Like, I think the idea of the Constitution needs to be exactly what was originally written and nothing else, I don't agree with. But
the more specific you get, meaning right when you write one more law, that means that anything that it didn't cover is now not covered. Because when you write a general law, everything's covered, and then you get more specific, and then people start getting siphoned off.
And the problem with doing all of this stuff is, like, by what standard are we all measuring this? Like, anything that's right or wrong, you have to go based on what?
Yeah.
And for us, it's obviously the Bible. We point to that as the foundational thing that guides us morally as a people. That tells us what is right and wrong.
Yep.
And if you don't have something like that,
Yeah.
it can become completely arbitrary. And you're
It's a good point,
and you're pulled by history. You're pulled by anything.
Well, that's the thing, is it brings us to the third part of this, which is how reliable is our history, which has been a huge. I think this is a huge. This is kind of the reason I wanted to do the conversation. Is I think in recent time people have just become so questionable about their history, what their government's telling them, like especially in the United States.
Yeah.
I think so. How do you believe anyone anymore? Is essentially what I'm getting at. Like, what are the factors you need to see to believe a recorded event happened for sure? So is that witnesses? Is it hard copy, photographic evidence? What do you
The
determine?
crazy thing is, it doesn't matter because it's different for other people. You can have a video of something happening, and everybody has different opinions on what actually happened in the video.
Yeah.
And that's insane, but that's what perspective is.
Yeah.
And it's
It's kind of like what we were talking about with the last duel. That whole conversation with the last duel, the movie.
The Last Duel. Yes, I thought you said The Last Tool, and I was like, huh? Yeah.
Anyway.
Like the idea of perspective is so powerful that it can taint and obscure everything that we see. So it's really hard, but again, I kind of go by what's standard, and like the biblical evidence that you need for our justice system is based on biblical law, and you have to have 2 witnesses at least for something to even be considered. It doesn't mean it's true if there are 2 witnesses, but you have to have that as a bare minimum to even consider something as valid. And I think that's just the base level starting point. Like, people need to have seen it, and then, like, you look at accounts from guys from
Tell the truth.
yeah. You look at accounts from guys in World War II.
Uh-huh.
Like, you read a Stephen Ambrose book or something about
Sure.
what these guys did over there. And I do think people were more truthful pre-internet, because there's nothing.
People can justify lying now a little bit more.
Yeah, there's no goal in lying about stuff that you did in the war. A lot of those guys in the war didn't talk about it just because they didn't want to deal with it. But there's no now you can lie about yourself or lie about something that happened to you to get attention from everyone in the entire world, because it's out there for everybody to see. So I think history, I don't feel like I have a problem believing historical stuff up until the last 40 years, when internet and media really started getting going and twisting things so much. I mean, this kind of deals with your next question, but like, so much of this has
let's let Jake answer
Sorry,
that first
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Oh, I don't.
After watching the X-Files.
No, I
I'm just
mean,
kidding.
I went down. Mrs. I can't remember her name. She taught English at CJ for like 2 years when we were in. I was a freshman and sophomore, and Mrs. McKenzie.
That sounds right.
She made a joke one day in class, and she joked about Tupac still being alive. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" We talked about it, and she was like, "Yeah, there's a conspiracy. He's still alive." And I was like, "But he's dead." And she was like, "Well, the thing is," and then told me, and I was like, and I couldn't.
People can just believe stuff.
I couldn't believe it, and so I was like, okay. And so I went down, and there's a rabbit hole that you can do the same thing for DMX, and this was before DMX had died, obviously, but DMX was huge, early 2000s, rap star. I mean, like, huge, and just disappeared. I mean, not disappeared, but fell off of everything, every record label, blah, blah, blah. And the theory is that he became a Christian in the higher ups in the music industry and the people that control all the money and all the at the time the videos and stuff, they just didn't want anything to do with him, erased him, said he was addicted to drugs, said that he was like killing people, said that he was like murdering women or whatever. They said all this stuff about him, and so everyone was like, yeah, that's true, obviously. No one likes DMX anymore, and then he was just gone. And so I watched an interview with him when he was in prison for all this stuff that he didn't do, and he's like, let me tell you something. And he just like looks at the camera and he's like, don't believe everything you don't believe everything you hear, don't believe everything you read, and only believe half of what you see. And I was like, that's insane. Mm-hmm. And I still feel like that's true because I watched this video on Twitter, and it was this kid. There's this little kid, and he's on the balcony of, it looks like a hotel or whatever, and there's like a highway underneath, and you know, and he's like, he's on the outside of the railing, and he's like, and then they deconstruct the video, and he's on the side of a pool. They put the railing in the video, and then they green screened the highway. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
The kid is just like shuffling along the edge of a pool, and it literally looks like he's hanging on the side of a hotel. It was unbelievable. Yep. Actually unbelievable. And so I don't know. It's really hard to be like, well, if I can't find this same thing or this same piece of information or this same perspective from 7 other people that aren't affiliated at all, I'm not even going to give it the time of day.
Basically, corroboration is pretty much the only thing that could...
Because I think it's that easy. It's that, I mean, we could put Tom Cruise's face on you this entire episode, and we could be like, oh my gosh, guys, we got Tom Cruise on this podcast. I mean, it's crazy.
Especially video and photography is
technology. That's
so
the
highly
thing.
editable
like,
now. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what I think about what to believe.
Well, that's my next point is, why do we find it so hard to believe, so difficult to believe a story, or...
I think it all has to do with postmodernism. Postmodernism...
What's that, like the rise of individualism?
No, postmodernism is... The problem with it is it's so hard to define in a concise way. It's essentially...
Then pretend I didn't ask.
It's essentially...
Interesting. Why do you feel that
what year did it start?
postmodernism?
It's essentially deconstructing everything. The idea that nothing is true. Like... actually true, and everything can be questioned. Literally everything.
Objectivity's gone.
Yes, the idea that your truth is actually true.
Oh yeah, okay.
Like that kind of thing all stems from postmodernism, and it started academically,
right?
Like just critical thinking of things, which is fine if you're critically analyzing something.
Everyone thought they were Einstein.
But it gets to a point where you're deconstructing reality to a point where nobody knows what to believe anymore because everyone thinks something different.
And the logical next step, live in the metaverse. And then you know it's all fake, baby. You don't have to worry about anything.
Does the further away event happens from where we are right now affect how believable it is, or affect how factual something can be perceived, let's say?
To me, it doesn't have to do with how far away the event actually was. To me, it has to do with the context of the environment that the event happened in. Like
a soundstage, like the moon landing or something.
Exactly.
Like,
I mean, you've got Kubrick behind that camera. It's like, what?
So like I was saying, technology, like modern technology,
nice, dude. Nice.
Pre-modern technology, I think the postmodern thing had not like
exploded,
penetrated all of everything. So people weren't doing that. They were just saying like, this is what happened, as opposed to, now, was it actually what happened, or is that what I just thought happened? What did I think happened as opposed to what actually happened? How did I feel about what happened? That's what happened. Like, people weren't doing that. Like, you talk to someone from that generation, like 40s and before, like our grandparents or whatever, and they're like, what do you mean it happened? Like, why are you questioning X, Y, and Z. They don't think that way because it's just the events that happen. Now, could there be some grand conspiracies going on at that time? I suppose so. But I think the advent of postmodernism and technology together have really like just torn apart what we can believe, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's tied into events. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, you look at like the conspiracy theories now with things like Epstein or Russia and Trump.
Wayfair.
Or what?
Remember when everyone thought Wayfair was
Oh
sex
yeah, because that
trafficking
thing
kids?
popped up on their website or something. Yeah. You have all of these things, and there's evidence to support it, but there's also another side that says no, that's all bullcrap. So like,
Yep.
the more recent something happened, because of the era that we're living in,
I think it's actually less believable.
I think it's less believable. You know.
Yeah.
Interesting. You got anything on that? Guys, let's have fun. Ready?
Lightning round.
We're gonna have fun.
Okay.
Okay?
I've had a blast this whole time.
We've been talking in history. We're gonna play a game.
That's serious.
Yeah. It's like we figured it out.
Postmodernism, I know what it is.
Definitely.
Because you don't.
1850.
Yes, it's slavery.
Okay. So, if you could live your life starting at any 1 year in any one location on Earth, what would it be and where would you be?
I'm born.
You start your life at this 1 year. So if you want to calculate, it says you live your life. So let's just say you're 30 years old
In whatever
In this
year,
year?
at whatever location I choose.
at whatever location. Exclusive YouTube content.
Us thinking. Selfishly, I'd like to be 30 at the rap battle that Eminem lost, where
Yeah,
where Dr. Dre saw him
I love it.
and signed him.
I love it.
How is that selfish?
Because
It's an inherently selfish question.
I think all of it is. Any answer you do
well, it
is a
shouldn't be a selfish question, right? It's like, well, if I could go back and change this or that, it's like, well, really,
Oh, that's boring.
if I did that, then maybe.
Oh no, you're not changing anything. It's just you're living in this time essentially.
Yeah, I know,
Okay.
but it would change
Do we
my life.
have the knowledge that we have now going back into time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
we're time traveling.
That would be great.
Yeah. Actually, no. You don't have the knowledge.
I'd probably
You're
choose something
just
different.
living your life then.
I'd probably choose something different.
You
then.
wouldn't just be a bystander, like you happen to be living there and be super into rap. I'm like, I'm just gonna go to this rap battle.
I think.
Nope.
I think living in the era of having pride in what you do and where you come from would be really cool to live in. I think I'd like to be like mid-30s when we land on the moon.
Mm.
I think I'd probably go back to 65 or something. There's no.
I've always loved the 50s.
Mm.
Kind of the post-war era where things were pretty good.
Looking
Yes, the
up.
Cold War was going on,
Mm-hmm.
but we had established ourselves as the predominant superpower in the world, and life in the U.S. was pretty solid. Obviously, there was problems still. We haven't had the civil rights movement yet at that point. But I think it would be cool to be around in the 50s and to see that change that happened into the 1960s. Like, I think a lot of stuff happened in the 1960s that led to terrible things today.
Dude, I'd be younger than you if we met. Dude, that would be crazy.
Wait,
Let me dial mine up real quick.
If you were 30 in the 50s,
Yeah.
and I was
I'd be
30 in
40
65,
in the
yeah.
60s.
That's crazy.
Mine's the 20s.
The roaring 20s. Go back, hear some of that roar.
I'm sure I had a good answer before. This was whenever I wrote the outline. I probably had one and I forgot to write it down. But I would say...
Let me tell you, my friend, that is history.
It's exactly right.
Zing!
Next. Okay. I would say the 20s. The American 20s have always been interesting to me, just to see, you know, the golden age of Hollywood and the beginning of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You could move out to California and buy a house for $5.
I think seeing that,
And make
it was still.
bank.
I mean, we're still a new nation, but even a newer nation than I
Yeah.
think would have been.
And a relatively new area, too, if you're in California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, you could go back and buy a house
I would.
for $5.
I didn't say where on mine. I'm sorry. I would say Chicago. I love the city of Chicago, and I think that era of Chicago would be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go out to LA and buy a house for $5.
Yeah, I would say if I'm going 20s, I've got to go Los Angeles. Okay. The second question is this.
We are at 1 hour, by the way.
Perfect.
I just want to see how much money I would have.
Yes. Inflation calculator.
Inflation calculator. Okay.
Like, this is your bank account now?
On
Are
my
you saying
end.
you bought a house for $5?
1965, if you had $40,000 to buy a house, how much would you have now?
200.
Oh my gosh, $357,000.
Yeah, baby.
$40,000 in 1965 is worth almost $400,000.
But a house like that now is probably worth like $3
$4
million.
million or something.
So close. 3.5, let's say.
Okay.
Okay. The second one, lightning round. This is not lightning, but it
It's
is
very
This is
slow.
a round.
I can lightning it up because I have to pee.
Who is the
Me
most
too.
influential human being to ever live?
Jesus.
Jesus doesn't count. I wrote it right
Oh,
here.
dang.
Jesus doesn't count.
Because he's fully God.
Because he's
and
the
fully
answer
Okay.
Abraham Lincoln.
to ever live.
Influential?
The most influential person to ever live.
The argument could also be made for Hitler, I think. Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're
Right.
saying that World War II
It's
shaped
not
the
necessarily
modern
his
world.
ideas influence things, but him just being alive influenced the direction of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man.
I think it's Napoleon. I think people don't think about Napoleon enough. They don't realize how much that time and that conquest
Mm-hmm.
affected the rest of the world forever, essentially.
He's Hitler before Hitler and without the
Oh, okay.
racial genocide, I don't think.
yeah.
I don't know enough about Napoleon to say that he definitively didn't
He's
genocide
probably
people,
racist,
but,
yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Columbus,
Super racist.
So racist.
but he discovered America.
Yeah. I want to say Thomas Jefferson is pretty up there, just the architect of the founding documents of the U.S.
Lightning.
All right.
I get it.
Yeah, lightning.
That's
He gets it.
It's been Franklin Jake.
Since its history, he's not sure if I said it on purpose or if I said it on
Yeah.
purpose.
Uh-huh. Okay, last question. This is the last question of the whole
Okay.
cast, guys. If you could go back into your own life and change one thing that you did, what would it be? As insignificant or significant as you like. For me, let me start off. I have this weird thing. I was probably like 8 years old, and I remember we were friends with our neighbors. This is gonna blow Wes's mind. The Kolkmeyers. I don't know if you remember. They lived right down the street.
Uh-huh.
I was really good friends with Dane Kolkmeyer.
Wow. Dane.
And I remember we were just playing in his yard one day, and I can't tell you why. I have no idea why. I just picked up a stick and threw it in his direction, and it smoked him right in the head. And we never hung out again.
Oh man.
Dude, it's crazy. Like, I don't know why. Every once in a while I just get like just a tinge of that memory.
Wow.
And it's like you're 8 years old. It's like you're not a human. You can't have like I wasn't in control of my
Brain.
decisions, you know? It's like yeah, it's crazy. So even as insignificant as that, like you have one.
The thing I think about moments
I would change it. I would throw it harder. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I just think about moments similarly where you just say something super stupid, and
Yeah, that's
you're like,
kind of the same feeling
ugh.
for sure. Yeah.
and there's so many of those. I don't know if I could pick one in particular. And some of them are like so embarrassing that you don't want to like talk about it really. But
Jake, do you have
I
one?
don't know.
I think I would just go back to high school and try harder. I think I would do that in everything. I think I would. I think
feel
I
that.
took it pretty easy, like in basketball, which is a big regret because my dad the whole time is like, you go from playing in front of 300 people a day to 5 people that are waiting to play at the rec, like in a day. It changes, you know. And I played at Ozark. It just wasn't the same because you don't grow up with those people. But obviously, I didn't really try in school. I think I'm okay with that decision. I think I had priorities higher than that, and I think that's fine. Even like Jets in high school now and stuff, and I'm like, you should learn for sure, but you realize that almost everything you do from now on won't matter about whether you got an A- or an A. I mean, if you want to go to Harvard, you better get an A. But, you know, and so I think I'm okay
Even
with that.
the stuff you're
but
learning is much different than the
Exactly.
usable stuff in your life. You
yeah.
know?
So I think I'd try harder, just in general.
Actually,
like that.
This might surprise you guys. I would probably not get a film degree. I would study film on my own because the majority of what I have learned about film production has not been from college.
I was gonna say, and that's on your point too. I think now, especially after the 90s, when you could Google something, or the 2000s, it's like that changed the way people learn things. You don't have to go to Harvard to get a great education.
I would not have gone to Missouri State, and I wouldn't have gotten a film degree. I would have still pursued filmmaking,
Right.
but I should have got it through my skull at the time that I didn't need a film degree to try and make it in film production, because some of the great filmmakers of all time didn't go to film school, and they're fine, you know. So, I probably wouldn't have done that. I would have gotten something that would be useful in case the film stuff had not happened. Because my
electrician.
I don't know, teacher or teaching or writing or something more applicable to other aspects of life. Because my problem now is, now that I have decided to not do film production, I've been blessed that I have an opportunity to work for a company that's cool like MJT, but jobs around here for people that have a film degree are like nothing.
Yeah.
I found one and it was okay.
Yeah.
But
Hey man, it's never too late to start. Go to night school, get a new one.
no.
Oh.
Anyways, but yeah, that would probably be my choice.
Well, there you have it, everybody. We've emptied our drinks, kind of.
Mostly.
We've emptied our hearts. We've emptied our minds.
We've emptied our friendship.
We've emptied our friendship. This is it.
This is the
so.
end.
It's been fun.
I'm Jake.
Yeah, I think you could say that our friendship is history.
I'm Jake and I have to pee.
Jake has to pee. I am Peyton, and this is.
I'm Wes, and I also have to pee.
Thanks for taking part in our history, because this is part of history now.
Whoa.
We'll see you next time. Stop.